There is something that begins to change when spiritual awakening deepens. It's not something visible to common eyes, nor easy to explain with words. It's a shift in the way reality is perceived. The world remains the same, people remain the same, but the way of seeing all of it is no longer the same. And it is precisely there that the difference is born between those who have awakened and those who still live on autopilot. The awakened chosen ones don't see an alternate world. They don't access hidden secrets or parallel realities. What they see is exactly what has always been in front of everyone, only without the filters most people learned to use since early on. Filters of fear, conditioning, repetitive thinking, inherited concepts. While many look, the awakened truly see. This different perception usually causes estrangement. The awakened begins to notice patterns that once went unnoticed. They perceive inconsistencies in speech, superficiality in relationships, automatism in behaviors, not out of judgment, but out of clarity. They feel that something no longer fits, even when everything seems normal to others. That's why many chosen ones feel out of place, not because they are superior, but because they can no longer ignore what they see. Reality becomes clearer. Masks become evident. Silence speaks louder than words, and the present becomes more real than mental stories about the past or future. Awakening doesn't add something new to the person. It removes. It removes noise, excessive thinking, blind identification with the ego. And when that happens, life begins to be perceived in a direct, vivid, and immediate way. That's what the awakened see. And that's what many still cannot see. Not because they can't, but because they're still trapped in the filters. One of the first things that change in spiritual awakening is the way reality is perceived. The chosen one begins to notice that most people do not live in direct contact with what is actually happening, but rather with mental interpretations of everything. This is not about ignorance or lack of intelligence. It is about conditioning. From an early age, we learn to name things, create concepts, form opinions, and react automatically. Over time, we begin to confuse these mental layers with reality itself. The awakened one perceives this confusion. They notice that between what happens and what is thought about what happens, there is a space. And that space changes everything. While many look at a situation and immediately judge, label, or react, the awakened one first observes. They sense the environment. They perceive the emotional atmosphere. They notice intentions that are not spoken in words. This is not a mystical gift. It is recovered sensitivity. The awakened chosen ones see that much of human suffering comes from constant interpretation, not the actual fact. They see people reacting more to their own mental stories than to reality. Arguments arise from misunderstandings. Conflicts grow from unspoken expectations. Anxieties feed on scenarios that don't even exist yet. This clearer view makes the awakened seem strange to others. They don't react as expected. They don't engage in certain emotional games. They don't get involved in unnecessary dramas, not because they are cold, but because they see beyond the surface. Another thing the awakened perceive is how much people are trapped in roles: social, professional, familial, spiritual roles. Many confuse who they are with what they do, what they have, or with the image they need to uphold. The chosen one begins to see this as a fragile construction. They see that behind many behaviors lies the fear of rejection, fear of not belonging, fear of losing value. And in seeing this, they stop being moved by these fears. This brings inner freedom, but also loneliness at times, because not everyone understands this perspective. The awakened also perceive how the world rewards appearance more than truth, speech more than coherence, movement more than consciousness. And this creates a deep weariness in those who can no longer live behind a mask. There is no judgment in this, only clarity. Seeing beyond the filters does not mean despising the world. It means not being ruled by it. The chosen one learns to participate without getting lost, to observe without being contaminated, to act without fully identifying with the outcome. This way of seeing does not come from effort. It emerges when the excess falls away, when the noise diminishes, when the person stops living only in their head and returns to inhabit the present. That's why awakening doesn't add something new. It removes what was clouding the vision. And once that vision opens, there's no way to pretend not to see anymore. Another central point of what the spiritually awakened see is the relationship with their own mind. Most people believe they are the voice that speaks inside their head. That constant narration that comments on everything, judges everything, compares everything, and anticipates problems. For many, that voice is the self. The awakened chosen one begins to perceive something simple but profound. Thoughts arise and disappear. Emotions come and go. States change. And yet, there is something that remains, observing all of it. This recognition completely changes the relationship with the mind. When the awakened one realizes they can observe their thoughts, they understand that they cannot be just those thoughts. They begin to see them as events, not as identity. This drastically reduces unnecessary suffering. Negative thoughts still arise, but they don't dominate. Difficult emotions still appear, but they don't define who they are. This perception brings inner space. The chosen one doesn't need to react immediately to everything they think or feel. They gain time between stimulus and response. And in that space, discernment is born. The awakened see that much of humanity lives hypnotized by its own internal dialogue. People believe everything they think. They take thoughts as facts, stories as absolute truths, and from that, they build their lives. The chosen one begins to notice how this automatism generates anxiety, guilt, and fear. They see people suffering not from what is happening, but from what they are thinking about what is happening. And in seeing this, they begin to break free from the cycle. This doesn't mean the absence of thoughts. It means not being ruled by them. The awakened one doesn't try to silence the mind by force. They just stop confusing themselves with it. The mind becomes a tool, not a master. This change also alters how the chosen one relates to others. They realize that many people's reactions have nothing to do with them, but with the other person's inner world. This reduces conflicts, resentments, and the constant need for defense. Another important aspect is that, by not fully identifying with the mind, the chosen one begins to experience more presence. They feel the body more, perceive the environment more, live less in the past and the future. This brings a more vivid and direct sense of reality. The awakened see that the mind is useful, but limited. It was not made to command the entire life. When it takes that place, it causes suffering. When it's put in the right place, it serves. That is one of the biggest differences between those who have awakened and those who haven't. Not the type of thought, but the level of identification with it. And when that identification falls away, something essential is revealed. Life can be lived with more lightness, even in the midst of challenges. One of the deepest things the awakened chosen ones begin to see is that the sense of absolute separation does not hold up when observed closely. Most people live believing they are an isolated self, separate from the world, from others, and even from life itself. This perception creates fear, competition, and constant defense. The awakened begins to notice that this separation is more conceptual than real. They realize that everything is interconnected in ways that go beyond common logic. Not as a vague, mystical idea, but as a direct experience. They feel they are not outside of life, observing it, but inside it, participating in it. This completely changes the way they relate to the world. The chosen one begins to realize that hurting others is never neutral, not because of an imposed moral rule, but because the aggression returns internally. There is a silent recognition that everything is connected, even when forms appear different. The awakened see that many human actions are driven by the fear of separation, fear of losing, fear of being alone, fear of not being enough. This fear creates control, attachment, and a constant need for affirmation. When the illusion of separation begins to fall, that fear loses its power. This doesn't mean the awakened suddenly agree with everything or accept all behavior. On the contrary, they become more aware of boundaries. But those boundaries don't arise from hatred or blind defense. They arise from discernment. They understand where they can be without losing themselves, and where they need to step away to preserve their integrity. Another thing the chosen ones notice is that personal identity is more fluid than it seems. The self that defends itself so much is constantly changing. Thoughts change, emotions change, beliefs change. What seemed solid yesterday is no longer the same today. This perception weakens the excessive attachment to one's image. When the awakened see this, they become less rigid, less reactive, less attached to fixed opinions. They understand that defending the ego at all costs is to defend something unstable. This brings humility, but also freedom. This view also changes the relationship with nature and with the body. The chosen one begins to feel that they are not separate from the environment. They breathe and realize the air is not theirs, nor the world's. It is a flow. They eat and realize that it becomes part of them. Nothing is truly isolated. This understanding doesn't come from books. It comes from direct observation, from moments of silence when the mind is not trying to explain everything. In those moments, the feeling of unity naturally emerges. The awakened see that absolute separation is a useful construction for practical life, but limited when confused with deeper reality. And upon realizing this, something softens inside. Life ceases to be a constant fight against the world, and becomes a movement of which one is a part. Another striking aspect of what the awakened chosen ones see is the intelligence present in everything that exists. While many see the world as something chaotic, mechanical, or purposeless, the awakened begin to notice a silent order operating behind the forms. They observe their own body and realize they are not consciously in control of almost anything that truly sustains life. The heart beats on its own. Breathing happens. Digestion occurs. Wounds heal. The body responds to threats even before the mind perceives them. There is an intelligence constantly at work. This perception extends to nature, the growth of plants, the cycle of the seasons, the transformation of a seed into a tree. None of this requires conscious human effort. Everything happens in an organized, spontaneous, and precise way. The awakened begin to recognize that this same intelligence is present within themselves. This drastically reduces the need for excessive control. The chosen one realizes that trying to control everything causes suffering. Life doesn't always need to be forced. There are moments to act and moments to allow. Knowing the difference is a clear sign of spiritual maturity. The awakened also see that many internal conflicts come from the ego trying to take on a role that doesn't belong to it. The ego wants to decide everything, predict everything, guarantee everything. But life always escapes that control. When the chosen one realizes this, they relax internally. This relaxation does not lead to passivity. It leads to trust. Trust that something greater is sustaining the process. Even in difficult moments, the awakened feel they are not against life, but within it. This changes the way they go through losses, challenges, and uncertainties. Another important point is that the chosen one begins to notice that their actions often happen even before conscious thought. The idea arises, the movement happens, the decision reveals itself. This dismantles the illusion of an isolated controller running everything. This realization can be frightening at first. Many think they've lost control, but the awakened understand that absolute control never existed. There was only the belief in it. When that belief falls, relief emerges. The chosen ones see that life is happening through them, not against them, and this changes the tone of existence. Less struggle, less resistance, more flow. They do not become irresponsible. They become more attentive. They act when necessary, but don't torture themselves when something doesn't go as expected. They know they are part of a greater movement. This vision of life's intelligence is not theoretical. It manifests in the body, in the breath, in the way the awakened move through the day. There is more silent trust and less constant anxiety. And when this perception deepens, something essential changes. The chosen one no longer feels like a stranger in the world, but a living part of it. One of the most liberating perceptions that the awakened chosen ones begin to see is that the idea of absolute control is a deeply rooted illusion. Most people believe they are in control of their own lives all the time, that they think before acting, decide before feeling, and choose before being affected. The awakened one begins to observe with honesty and realizes that it doesn't happen that way. Thoughts arise without warning. Emotions appear before any rational decision. Reactions happen even before they can be explained. The chosen one starts to notice that life moves first, and the mind tries to explain afterward. This realization completely changes the relationship with guilt, fear, and self-demand. Upon seeing this, the awakened one understands that they are not an isolated controller trying to guide a chaotic universe. They are part of the very movement of life. This does not eliminate responsibility, but it eliminates the internal torture of trying to control the uncontrollable. Excessive effort gives way to conscious attention. The chosen ones see that many people suffer because they believe they should be living something different from what they are living now. They fight with the present moment. They blame themselves for the past. They constantly fear the future. The awakened one realizes that this struggle is unnecessary and unproductive. When the illusion of control begins to fall, a deep relief emerges. Life begins to be lived with more spontaneity. The chosen one acts, but doesn't emotionally destroy themselves when something doesn't go as expected. They understand they did what they could with the awareness they had at that moment. This perception also dismantles constant anxiety. If everything depends solely on the ego, any mistake seems fatal. But when the awakened one sees that there is a greater intelligence guiding the flow of life, they relax internally. They don't become careless, but confident. The chosen ones see that the sensation of being a separate self-making decisions is just another thought arising in consciousness. The "I did this, I chose that" often appears after the action has already taken place. This doesn't take value from the experience, but puts things into perspective. This view changes how the awakened one deals with failures and successes. They learn from mistakes without defining themselves by them. They celebrate achievements without clinging to them. Life becomes less heavy because the ego stops carrying a burden it was never able to hold. Another important point is that this perception reduces the fear of making mistakes. If life is happening through you, making mistakes is part of the process. There's no need to be paralyzed trying to predict every possibility. The chosen one acts more naturally. The awakened ones see that excessive control creates rigidity. Rigidity breaks, flexibility adapts. By letting go of control, the person becomes more capable of responding to what arises instead of resisting what wasn't planned. This view does not lead to passivity, but to presence. The chosen one continues to act, create, and move, but without the illusion that they must dominate everything to feel safe. Safety now comes from trust in the flow of life. Another clear perception of the spiritually awakened is the relationship with time. Most people mentally live outside the present. They are trapped in memories of the past or worried about projections of the future. Few truly inhabit the now. The chosen one begins to see this clearly. They realize that the past exists only as a present memory. The future exists only as a present expectation. Both arise as thoughts now. When this becomes clear, something changes profoundly in the way they live. The awakened do not ignore the past nor despise the future. They learn from what has been lived and plan when necessary. But they do not confuse these mental activities with reality. Reality always happens in the now. This perception brings presence. The chosen one begins to notice details previously ignored. Sounds, sensations, breathing, silence. Life becomes more vivid because the mind is not constantly fleeing to another time. The chosen ones see that much of human suffering comes from resisting the present moment. People suffer because they want the now to be different than it is. The awakened one sees that resisting the now only creates additional tension. When acceptance of the present moment deepens, the mind slows down. The incessant flow of commentary decreases. It doesn't disappear completely, but it loses its protagonism. The chosen one begins to live more in the experience than in the narrative about the experience. This shift also changes the relationship with fear. Fear lives in the imagined future. When the awakened one returns to the now, they realize that at this exact moment, everything is usually okay. This doesn't eliminate challenges, but it reduces anticipatory anxiety. The chosen ones see that the now is enough. Not in the sense of resignation, but in the sense of fullness. The present moment contains everything necessary to act, respond, and decide. There's no need to mentally rush forward all the time. After all these perceptions, something becomes clear. What the awakened chosen ones see is not a set of beautiful ideas or lofty concepts. It is a practical change in the way of living. Life is no longer just something to be interpreted, but something to be directly experienced. The awakened one realizes that they don't need to understand everything to live well. They realize that many questions that once seemed urgent lose importance as presence deepens. The constant need for explanations diminishes. Silence is no longer uncomfortable and becomes a place of clarity. This way of seeing changes the relationship with problems. Challenges still exist, but they no longer dominate the entire experience. The awakened one sees that the additional suffering came from resistance, internal complaining, and excessive identification with the mental narrative. When that drops, only what actually needs to be resolved remains, without extra drama. The awakened chosen ones also see that life doesn't have to be carried so heavily. Not in the sense of irresponsibility, but in the sense of inner lightness. They understand that they are playing a role in the world, but are not limited by it. This brings freedom to act more authentically. This clarity also reduces the need to convince anyone. The chosen one understands that each person sees reality from the level of consciousness they are in. There is no urgency to wake anyone up. Awakening is not imposed. It is recognized internally. That's why many awakened ones speak less and observe more. What they see also changes the relationship with spirituality. It ceases to be something distant, theoretical, or based solely on beliefs. It becomes something lived every day, simple. The sacred is no longer separate from ordinary life. It is perceived in the now, in silence, in the natural movement of existence. Spiritual awakening is not an isolated event, nor an achievement that places someone above others. It is a silent process of peeling away layers of conditioning, excessive identification with thoughts, inherited beliefs, and emotional automatisms. What the awakened chosen ones see does not arise because they gained something new, but because they stopped carrying what distorted the vision. When that inner gaze deepens, something changes in the relationship with the world. Things keep happening, but not in the same way. Situations that once triggered intense reactions start to be observed with more inner space. Conflicts that once felt personal begin to be seen as expressions of conditioning. The awakened one does not become indifferent, but becomes less hostage to their own reactions. The awakened chosen ones see that much of human suffering does not come from events themselves, but from the resistance to them. From the constant attempt to control, explain, justify, and predict everything. The mind wants absolute security, but life has never offered that. When this truth is clearly seen, a different kind of security arises, not based on control, but on presence. Presence is one of the key words of awakening, although it cannot fully capture the experience itself. Being present is not just paying attention, it is being whole in the moment, without constantly fleeing into thoughts about the past or future. The awakened one begins to live more in this space.